And by the end of the film, I just remember just being so touched and moved and having no idea of what so many women experience.
Lily Bloom is all about flowers. Oh, look at me in flowers, she says, and it feels effortless, like an extension of her personality. It's simple, yet it carries depth. We just like to go deep-sea diving into these experiences, immersing ourselves fully in whatever we're passionate about. I genuinely think I poured more of myself into that movie than I ever would into something as mundane as sharing my address, phone number, or location. It's an expression of who I am, and in a way, sharing that on screen feels more intimate than revealing personal information. I could just share my location with someone, and it might give them a sense of me, but it wouldn't capture my essence. That's what your character conveys. If your personality is filled with light, levity, love, joy, and hope, then that's naturally reflected in your character, and it shines through in everything you do. On a personal note, he does send me flowers, which is such a thoughtful gesture. He's genuinely considerate and consistent about small acts of kindness, and that matters. And when it comes to marrying your best friend, I think the key is exactly that. Marry your best mate. Build a life with someone whose victories, struggles, and daily experiences are intertwined with yours. His wins and celebrations become yours, and yours become his. That kind of partnership is rare and precious. He's fully present in our relationship, and I try to match that, fully embracing and supporting every aspect of his life. It's a beautiful balance, and it's what makes the connection feel real, grounded, and lasting. Hi besties, welcome back to my channel. Things are heating up because Wayfair has responded, and Blake Lively, along with her attorneys, as well as Ryan Reynolds' legal team, could be facing serious trouble for what may be a violation of a protective order. This isn't minor, it could lead to a full-blown lawsuit, a contempt order, disciplinary actions against the attorneys involved, or a variety of other legal complications. Just yesterday, Blake Lively's attorney, Kristen Bender, filed a letter on the court docket that included a deposition transcript from Wayfair's attorneys, with specific sections highlighted to indicate what they wanted to remain confidential. The problem is that nothing was actually redacted, and when the document was uploaded to the docket, it became publicly accessible. As many of you know, certain attorneys, whether intentionally or through oversight, can ask for extremely sensitive personal information, like your home address, phone number, social security number, or email address. When that information isn't properly protected, it can make life unnecessarily complicated and potentially risky. Situations like this highlight the importance of attention to detail and careful handling of confidential material in legal proceedings, because a single oversight can have far-reaching consequences. Attorneys can request pretty much whatever they want because it goes on the official record, and once it's there, in the wrong hands, that information can be distributed. That's exactly why Blake Lively went to the court early on and requested a protective order. She was genuinely concerned for her safety and worried about being doxxed, which could put her life at risk. Ironically, despite those concerns, it seems that no one has compromised the safety of more people than Blake and Ryan themselves. By March, the court issued a protective order with extremely strict limits and harsh penalties for anyone who breached it. This wasn't done lightly, it was intended to make sure everyone followed the rules. The court made it clear that serious consequences would follow any violations because the perceived threat level was so high that Blake's team feared for their lives. The protective order explicitly stated that all parties are on notice, that the court is unlikely to seal or otherwise treat confidential any discovery, material introduced as evidence at trial, or in support of, or opposition to, any motion for summary judgment even if the material had been previously sealed or designated as confidential. Everyone involved was specifically instructed to file sensitive materials under seal while publicly submitting a redacted copy through the court's electronic case filing system. The order also went into meticulous detail about protecting personally identifying information, phir, social security numbers, phone numbers, personal addresses, financial account numbers, passwords, or any other data that could be used for identity theft, were required to be maintained in a secure and confidential manner by anyone who received them. If someone experienced a data breach, they were obligated to immediately notify the person who provided the information and cooperate to remedy the breach. The protective order made it clear that these obligations were binding and would survive the conclusion of the litigation. Additionally, it emphasized that following these rules did not prevent the producing party from asserting legal claims or waive any legal rights or defenses if someone failed to protect sensitive information. Essentially, the court was drawing a firm line. The safety of individuals and the integrity of private information had to be taken seriously, and anyone who ignored those rules could face serious repercussions. All persons subject to this protective order are explicitly on notice that willful violations could result in punishment for contempt of court. The court retains jurisdiction over anyone bound by this order to enforce obligations or impose sanctions for contempt. From the beginning, the court made it crystal clear, under no circumstances should anyone file personal identifying information, phis such as home addresses, phone numbers, or email addresses. Despite this, Blake Lively ran afoul of the order over the summer. She repeatedly filed docket numbers that included sensitive information, including people's email addresses, phone numbers, and even physical addresses, effectively doxing them. The situation escalated to the point that the judge had to issue a second protective order, Docket 619, which specifically addressed the handling of phone numbers and email addresses. This order clarified that attorneys no longer needed to request leave to file these materials if they were properly redacted. Yet, the recent deposition filings highlight a continued mishandling of sensitive information. Blake's attorneys submitted a deposition transcript that included Jaime's home address and Justin's new address in a different state, which he had relocated to for safety reasons. During his deposition, Justin also revealed that he had hired personal security due to threats arising from the litigation. In addition to PI, the transcripts contained sensitive financial information about the company, lost projects, revenue data, and irrelevant details about former employees. Many of these details should have been redacted before filing. Despite having the ability to redact this information and the court's explicit instructions, Kristen Bender, Blake's attorney, attached the transcripts to the docket claiming they were redacted. However, the transcripts, one of which exceeded 643 pages, were not properly handled. Jonathan Batch, an attorney representing Wayfair, responded, noting that these filings contained public identifying information that the court had previously ordered to remain sealed under dockets 125 and 619. Docket 125 was the original protective order, and 619 was the follow-up warning that Blake had already been given after repeatedly doxing others. The fact that sensitive information was once again publicly filed despite these clear instructions is a serious concern. The gravity of this misstep is amplified by the procedural errors. When filing materials accidentally made public, it is standard practice to immediately notify the court with a separate letter requesting restriction. This step was not taken. Instead, the documents sat on the docket, potentially exposing sensitive PI. It appears that a court clerk noticed the issue, but the damage had already been done. Essentially, this situation represents not only a breach of the protective order but also a significant failure to follow standard court procedures designed to protect the privacy and safety of individuals involved. After the filing errors, the court became aware that personally identifying information PI had been inadvertently included in the public docket. As a result, access to the documents was restricted because they contained sensitive addresses and other private data. However, neither Blake Lively's attorneys nor the court were proactively notified about the mistake. Crucially, Wayfair, Baldoni, and their legal teams were also not informed. Despite this, the transcripts made their way onto Court Listener, a publicly accessible platform where anyone could download them. Copies of these documents are now circulating widely. I've reviewed the transcripts myself and made a video about parts of the testimony, carefully ensuring that nothing I shared was originally designated as confidential. I only reported what had been decertified by Blake's team. Yet, the documents still contain a massive amount of information that Blake's team had sought to keep under seal, including financial details like how much money they made on the film, lost projects, and other sensitive corporate data. Strikingly, the inclusion of personal addresses makes the situation even more baffling and concerning. In response to the breach, the court has been notified, and a letter under seal is reportedly being sent to address the issue. Although the specifics of what will be requested remain unclear, it's important to understand the legal stakes here. Attorneys are required to strictly follow protective orders. Failure to do so can result in a range of sanctions, including monetary penalties, formal reprimands, or even contempt of court. Because all filings in federal court are attributed to the party represented in this case, Blake Lively, she is directly accountable for any breaches of the protective order. Even though her attorneys filed the documents, the filings are legally attributed to her. This means that she can be personally sanctioned, held in contempt, or even exposed to civil claims from Wayfair if they choose to pursue that route. Attorneys acting contrary to the protective order could also face disciplinary action from the bar or the court, though that's a higher threshold. The irony is stark. Blake Lively, who has spent significant effort seeking sanctions against others, has now potentially opened herself up to a new set of legal consequences. By filing unredacted PI, she has exposed herself to liability, highlighting just how serious and unforgiving breaches of protective orders can be in federal court. This situation underscores the absolute importance of carefully handling sensitive information, because even a single oversight can have dramatic legal repercussions. At this point, it's important to clarify that we're talking about possible civil contempt, not criminal contempt. Civil contempt is designed to enforce compliance with a court order, and in this context, it could have serious consequences for Blake Lively and her attorneys. For instance, the court could strike the filing entirely, permanently removing all the documents, even though they are now restricted, and she could face fines or have evidence excluded. In addition, there could be separate liability through a new civil lawsuit. A protective order functions essentially like a contract that the parties agree to. When it's a stipulated protective order, everyone has signed off on it, meaning that a breach such as disclosing personal identifying information (PI) can be treated as a contractual violation. This opens the door for lawsuits for breach of contract, as well as potential privacy tort claims, including invasion of privacy, negligence, or even intentional infliction of emotional distress. Wayfair could, for instance, pursue claims against Blake or her attorneys for failing to properly redact sensitive information. Blake herself could potentially sue her own attorneys for malpractice for failing to protect Justin's and Jaime's information. Complaints could also be filed with the bar against Kristen Bender for professional misconduct. Civil contempt is generally remedial, designed to compel compliance rather than punish, but if the court determined that the breach was willful, that it was done intentionally, perhaps even to harm or embarrass someone, it could escalate to criminal contempt. Criminal contempt is extremely rare in these circumstances, but it carries more serious penalties, including fines of up to $1,000 and even possible imprisonment. In this case, however, the breach concerns PII, so criminal contempt is unlikely. The main risk lies in civil remedies. The attorneys had a clear duty to notify the court of the filing error. It was not Wayfair's responsibility. Because they failed to do so, both Blake and her attorneys are now in jeopardy. The court could sanction the attorneys directly, require them to pay for Wayfair's attorneys' fees in responding to the breach, and even award damages. Any lawsuits arising from the exposure of PII could list Blake as a defendant, putting her in a vulnerable position. Ironically, this comes at a critical juncture. The case itself was nearing resolution. Blake's actions have now created the potential for entirely new litigation, reversing the momentum and putting her on the defensive. What was supposed to be the home stretch of a legal battle has now transformed into a minefield of possible fines, sanctions, and civil claims. In short, this is a textbook example of how mishandling sensitive information, even unintentionally, can have massive legal consequences, exposing both a party and their attorneys to serious liability and creating new opportunities for the other side to seize the advantage. She has been on the offensive this entire time, and if they now shift to offense themselves, they'll be in a much stronger position to pressure her into either dropping the case or going to trial based on clear, literal violations. What's happening here is not minor at all. We're talking about the disclosure of Justin Baldoni's home address and Jamie Heath's home address. We already know that earlier in 2025, at the beginning of all this, someone located Steve Sorowitz's address, set a fire on his property, sent him ransom letters, and threatened to kidnap his daughter and murder both his wife and child. The man demanded hundreds of thousands of dollars, and real criminal charges were filed as a result. This shows that these are not hypothetical or minor threats. On top of that, there's an added layer of risk given the current climate, especially considering that Justin was born Jewish and Steve is Jewish, and crimes targeting Jewish people have been on the rise. Blake further inflamed tensions by publicly quoting Steve in relation to Hamas and Israel, which contributed to Steve feeling targeted. Especially after the 2 dead bodies comment, Steve has already experienced what a real threat looks like. Now Justin has moved across the country to an undisclosed location, living in a completely different state, and his address has never been public. Suddenly, that address is out there for anyone to see. Jamie Heath, who is a minor public figure and not a celebrity or wealthy individual, has now also been put at risk, along with his wife and his 2 young children. Justin also has 2 minor children. Justin may have security. It's unclear whether Jamie does. It's unclear whether Jamie does. At this point, anyone in their position would be beyond frustrated. What makes this even more infuriating is that she has gone before a judge, claiming that merely disclosing the names of her friends would put their lives in danger, insisting they would need extra security and could even be killed just by being named. She cited people like Alexis Bledel, Amber Tamblyn, Emily Blunt, Taylor Swift, Hugh Jackman, and Sean Levy, suggesting they might need to go into hiding. Yet, in the same breath, she files documents that expose actual residential addresses of private individuals. These were legitimate home addresses, not service addresses, and they were never publicly known. The defendants were served through their attorneys, not at their homes, and their addresses were not on the public docket. You can't simply Google Justin or Blake and Ryan and find where they live, because their properties are held in LLCs, as most celebrities do. By bypassing all of that, she knowingly put real lives in danger. This wasn't an accident. It's a pattern. Kristen Bender had a responsibility to redact those addresses before filing and failed to do so. Ultimately, Blake is responsible for the actions of her attorneys, and this move may have set her up to be held in contempt of court and potentially sued. As exhausting as this situation may be for them, it also opens the door for new claims and gives them a way to fight back, especially since she appears to be breaching a valid contract she signed and is bound to by court order, in a way that would be poetic justice.